and that is Mr. Michael Anisette, and you know him as the General Secretary of the National Trade Union Center, as well as the head of the Seawater, the Sea Workers and Waterfront Workers Association. Good morning and welcome to you, Mr. Anisette.
Pleasant morning to you. Blessings to Tobago and your listening public.
All right, great. So this morning we're getting into discussions about wage negotiations, and N.A.T.U.C this morning is saying no to that 4%. So just can you give us a little perspective on where the negotiations are at this point in time in terms of working out a solution with the CPU?
All right. We are not part of the, the CPO negotiating mechanism. We are with the Port Authority.
Okay.
But as the General Secretary of N.A.T.U.C, I can advise that the discussions, because I was part of that discussions with the CPO and his team, was one that was anti-social dialogue and anti-negotiations. In other words, the CPO came with a position, take it or leave it. There was no what I want to call meaningful discussions to find ways and mechanisms and processes in order to address the issue based on the union's articulation on the question of wages and other terms and conditions. And the attitude was, well, let the court decide. That is not the way you do industrial relations in Trinidad and Tobago and worldwide. But more importantly, this government is part of the ILO. And the ILO is clear that social dialogue and meeting and treating in good faith has to be a fundamental underpinning of any collective bargaining and negotiations. That is one aspect with the CPO. The other aspect has to do with the Port Authority, where we would have negotiated a 12% wage increase for 2014 to 2017, and where the NIB would have negotiated through PSA a 9% wage increase. And as I speak to you, the government have refused to give the instructions to both NIB and the Port Authority to implement those discussions, thereby concretizing the view that the union and the trade union movement have, that this government is timing negotiations. One, they want to suppress wages. Two, and this government is following a profit-led economy as opposed to a wage-led economy.
All right. I know I noted with very with interest during the budget debate this sort of attempt from the Minister of Finance to offer this bonus to those people, those workers throughout, public servants throughout, who have accepted the 4% offer in sort of hopes, or I guess trying to entice N.A.T.U.C and the rest of the trade unions that have not yet settled to accept the offer that's on the table. I mean, what do you think about that? This Christmas bonus being thrown at you guys and the workers.
No, well, the Christmas bonus was a deliberate attempt, and as we say in the labor movement and N.A.T.U.C, the question is why it is that the government would have allocate money. And let me make it clear, there are 86 registered unions. The people that we are talking about is police, fire, the army, prison services, who, if you talk to the representatives, their matter was referred to the essential industry, and there were threats that you can get 10 years in terms of the agreement, and the teachers too. So that when we talk about the unions, it's those groups of people that we are talking about. But the mass majority of workers, including PSA, would have rejected the 4%. But more importantly, as I speak to you, the TSTT, who the very said essential industry will have offered 000, that matter is now before the court waiting hearing, because there was an appeal based on the attitude, and the pronouncement and the decision made by the court. So I want people to understand that. And I want the workers to understand that those who are saying go and sign the 4%, and no one is saying that. PSA have over about 30 or more thousand members. Okay, and you had less than 200 people, some who were public servants, some who were not public servants. But more importantly, Trinidad, we must pay attention to certain things. There was someone who is not a member of the PSA who would have applied for permission to march in front of PSA. It was granted by the Commissioner of Police, and then they blocked off Abercrombie Street to allow someone who is not even a member of the PSA to protest against, right, the 4%, and Leroy Battis and other senior leaders like Michael Anisette and James Lambert, etc. We must ask ourselves as Trinidadian, is that democracy? How does that gel in your minds in the context of someone, right, who is not a member of a union, is not a member of PSC, who has no office whatsoever, who doesn't work with the government, can get a permission to call out a demonstration and protest against PSA? I just want to put that in the public domain so the public can think for themselves and understand what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. But we will continue as the Federation and the
Mhm.
Joint Trade Union Movement and N.A.T.U.C to argue that the 4% does not address the living standards of government employees. What it has done is to further pauperize public servants and government employees and push them further down the economic ladder. Why am I saying that? When one looks at the fact that government employees, port workers, NIS, IMA workers, and all WASA, all the other workers did not get any wage increase, some going back to 2012. And when one looks at the cost of living, our research would have demonstrated it has gone to almost 35 percentage points, and a government offer 0.02. And I want people to understand that 0.02 in the first 3 years. It's not a 4%, it's a 4% over 6 years, and 0.02 in the first 3 years is translated into 0.0066 percentage increase. It is less than a percent of increase that the government is offering over the
Mhm.
3 year period. And if you calculate the other 3 year period, which is 0.02%, is the same calculation. So the publics must ask themselves in Trinidad and Tobago, are we really believing that workers who would have had to face COVID-19, port workers who was there when everybody was home, nurses, public servants, and all these groups of workers, are we saying that the value of those workers' job is 0.066 percentage points for a 3 year period? That is what this is being translated to. And just let me add something, please, if you may allow. We are arguing for living wages. Why we are saying living wages? And I will give you what is the meaning of a living wages as expressed by the ILO, the International Labour Organizations, and other international institutions. A living wage is the amount of income needed to provide an employee with a basic but socially accepted standard of living. A living wage is calculated by first establishing the cost of of the basics, right? But decent life inclusive of food, housing, education, healthcare, transportation, clothing, and other essential needs for a family, including unexpected he gets. That
Hmm.
is the meaning of a living wage. And I will ask the question, given the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago that has risen exponentially over the years. Does a 0.0066 percentage points can make a government employee survive? That is the question, and that is why the union is arguing that you must treat workers in a decent way. You cannot just come and say, I don't have money to pay when the same private sector is paying workers a minimum of 9 percentage points over that very, say, 3 year period. And let me repeat, 3 year period. So the issue is about philosophy. The issue is
Hmm.
whether this government is interested in living wages, not minimum wages. We are not talking about minimum wages. We are talking about living wages for every Trinidadian and Tobagonian who is working in Trinidad, because your wage must be able to maintain a standard of living that would not drive you into poverty like is happening in Trinidad and Tobago.
What do you think is contributing to the reluctance from the government to go for a settlement that is more than 4%?
No, well, that is arrogance. It is arrogance, it is insensitivity, it's a level of dictatorship where do as I say. If I say I don't have money to pay, well, that's it. Do what you want. And you cannot develop a society where workers or where the citizenry feels that there's a lack of justice and workers are saying that. I wouldn't like to show you what I will want to call N.A.T.U.C page where workers are saying that, and he said, you're talking too much. It is time for us to take positive and progressive actions to address this government insensitivity and arrogance towards their workers, because the government in this instance is an employer and we cannot divorce that fact.
Hmm.
How do you say that I have no money? The economic crisis, COVID-19 would, of course, A, B, and C. But the very private sector, who was part of this society, who are the first who are affected when you have recessions and all these kinds of things, are giving wage increases to a minimum of 9% over the very, say, 3 year period. And I want to repeat it. The average that has been registered in the industrial court is an average of 9 percentage points
Hmm.
and not the 0.006 that this government is offering. The government is offering less than a percentage increase on your salaries for 3 years, because it's very easy to work out. Divide 3 years into 2% and you will get the answer.
Yeah.
Because the government may believe that because we are workers, we are foolish, and they could do us and say anything and make threats that if you get your back pay, you remember there was a saying by the Honorable Prime Minister, all you march up and down, all you want all your back pay. If all you get all your back pay, I go out to send on people. But the very government now offering during Christmas time and close inverted commas, Christmas time, back pay for workers. Who benefits in Trinidad and Tobago, given our culture, antecedents, and history when back pay is paid on a Christmas time? Who benefits?
Hmm. No, I mean, at this point in time, I mean, we've had these negotiations going on for so long. Is there anything that can be done? Is there any other step that N.A.T.U.C is willing to take to get a more satisfactory wage negotiation settlement?
All right, well, let me say, the National Trade Union Center, and may I speak for the whole labor movement, we are committed to meeting and treating with the government in order to find what I will call a reasonable resolution. And there are processes that can be used in order to resolve this particular issue. But if you have a belligerent government who makes an egregious proposal of 2% of wages over a 3-year period and 2% over another 3-year period, thereby denying some workers who would have retired pension benefits too. How do you address that particular issue? It
Hmm.
is unfortunate that we are seeing this resistance and this unwillingness on the government to engage in meaningful discussions with the labor movement to find a resolution. And anybody who living in Trinidad and or Tobago, any worker, even you, will know that the question of cost of living and inflation on your purchasing dollar would have dropped exceedingly during this period. And I'm saying workers didn't get any wage increases. From when? From when? From when? 2012 to 2013 to the present. That is the reality. But more importantly, we would have seen the university lecturers who are responsible for the education of our children, which is very important, would have demonstrated last week here,
Hmm.
because the government will have offered them only 2% increase. And those are our educators. They have our future in their hands. And if the government is so insensitive and callous to bring about that kind of social discord, well, then there is a time and a place for everything. That is what I'm prepared to say. But allow me to announce that the National Trade Union Center, we will be meeting in emergency session Saturday coming. I'm calling on all shop steward, branch officers, executive members, general council members, members of N.A.T.U.C who are shop stewards in various entities to come to the NUGFW Hall at 1 o'clock Saturday, where we will sit down and strategically build a consensus in terms of how we must move about demanding respect and dignity as workers. We are part of this society, and therefore the government must understand that leadership is about moral responsibilities and not making workers feel that they are being treated in a way that is less than humans and without respect and dignity. And that is the mass feeling of the mass majority of workers in the government service, given the government behavior in this matter.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Anisette, for being on with us and for giving us your perspective on this whole wage negotiation issue. And I certainly wish you best of luck as you try with the trade union to get a more satisfactory settlement.
No, no, it's not me, it's Trinidad and Tobago, because poverty brings about crime. Living wages and decent wages cause your economy to grow. That is an economic fact. Let me repeat it for the people. Poverty is one of the mechanisms that brings about crime, and poverty is reflected when workers work and their salaries and their wages do not have the potential of meeting their everyday commitment and household commitments as workers. That is an economic fact. It has happened all over the world, and we are going fast down a particular hill when we see in drugs, ammunition, youths fighting in school, and all these issues, that is a spin-off of poverty and an education system that needs to be looked at collectively and socially. It cannot be and it must not be that whatever the government say goes and there is no engagement. That cannot be a democratically run society, and that is what we are saying in the labor movement. This is not about the union, it's about the future of Trinidad and Tobago and whether we want wage-led growth as opposed to profit-led growth where a few people benefit and the workers have to be scrambling day in and day out to meet their daily commitments in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. Well, then thank you so much. And viewers, we got to go for a quick break, but when we come back, we have more conversations coming up for you. So please don't go anywhere.
Morning, rise up to a brand new dawning as the passion start to rise.